What's up guys, Mickle here, and last night I made a video about a potential Black Swan event that could be right around the corner, but little did I know that we were going to start seeing the signs of this Black Swan event as early as today. In this video, I actually want to talk about why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely pivotal moment for whether or not this Black Swan is going to play out. We have some massive issues brewing in our economy, and in this video, I want to break down exactly what's going on, get you guys in the loop for what you need to be paying attention to. Guys, this is no small matter. We are currently watching a banking crisis on the level of what we saw in 2008. I want to show you exactly what's playing out, how it's going to impact cryptocurrencies going forward, because let me tell you, if this thing plays out the way it could, every single asset class is going to be affected, and this is something you need to be prepared for. I also want to go over some interesting updates regarding the SEC and Gary Gensler. It looks like Gary Gensler could be ready to walk out the door of the SEC. I want to talk to you about something that just got reported on, so make sure to stick around for that. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Make sure you take a second to like this video down below and subscribe to my channel. It's really going to help me out so much. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP or the Flare token, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So I want to start out this video and talk about some quick updates relating to both the SEC, John Deaton, and Gary Gensler, but towards the end of the video really transition into talking about a huge event taking place tomorrow and really going over the macro environment. Now, I know a lot of people who watch this channel aren't that focused on the macro environment, but let me tell you right now, it is getting absolutely critical to pay attention to these things, so make sure you stick around to the end of the video. You are not going to want to miss it. So I want to start off and just quickly talk about something that was pretty interesting that was reported on earlier today, and that was in relation to Gary Gensler's future at the SEC. So Charles Gasparino, and I actually saw some other people reporting on this as well, were saying that Gary Gensler looks like he is not going to be able to get his job at the Treasury that he wanted, and it looks like he is now looking to move to a Senate position. Now, a lot of people were saying, oh no, Gary Gensler is going to be in the Senate, but in my opinion, this is fantastic news. The last thing we want is Gary Gensler to hold another position where he is going to have unchecked power. With him at the SEC, he's essentially been able to do whatever he wants. No one was able to stop him, and he would have been able to do the same thing at the Treasury. In fact, I actually think he could have done a lot more damage to cryptocurrencies if he was working at the Treasury. But if Gary Gensler is in Senate, there's really not much he can do. He's going to get outweighed by so many other voices. Ultimately, the Senate really doesn't get much done, so I'm perfectly fine with him going to the Senate. If Gary Gensler wants to run as a senator, he's going to have to get votes from the public. We know the public already hates this guy, and even if he got into the Senate, he's going to have his opinions heavily diluted by all the other senators. We know that there are actually a lot of cryptocurrency senators on his side of the aisle, so I just really don't see this as that bad of a thing. I really actually think it's a pretty bullish development that it looks like he's not going to get the Treasury job. That would have been the worst case scenario, because then he could have done all kinds of things to pass legislation to screw over the cryptocurrency industry, but the fact that it looks like he's getting ready to leave the SEC and it looks like he's not going to get the job at the Treasury, that is very good news. And if this guy even makes it into the Senate, then honestly, that is a lot better than where we're sitting right now. So now I want to move on and talk about a pretty interesting event that's going to be taking place next week. It looks like John Deaton's going to be doing a Twitter Live with the chief legal officer of Coinbase. Now, I definitely thought this was pretty interesting because it gives us some perspective on Coinbase's decision to delist XRP. So I know a lot of people are really mad that Coinbase delisted XRP, and honestly, I have made hundreds of comments about this in the past saying how I thought it was a really dumb move. Ultimately, the reason why I think it's such a dumb move for Coinbase to delist XRP is because their whole case against the SEC is saying, hey, we don't list securities. But if you went and delisted XRP, clearly that shows you're not that confident that you don't list securities, because if you really don't list securities, then what was the point in delisting XRP? It kind of just hurts your argument. It's like saying, officer, I wasn't speeding, but also slow down the next time I'm driving. Why would you say you had to slow down if you weren't speeding? That's kind of what Coinbase did here, and that's why I've been so critical of the move. But I have to give Coinbase some credit here. If they're willing to give John Deaton a platform, if they're willing to sit down with John Deaton and talk about the current issues going on at the SEC, clearly they don't have some vendetta against XRP. Clearly, it was obviously a policy mistake. When Coinbase delisted XRP, it was really the first cryptocurrency the SEC went after. Coinbase had just went public. I have a feeling Coinbase was just trying to be as conservative as possible. Then they realized the SEC stance was that every single cryptocurrency was a security. Obviously, Coinbase couldn't go delist every single cryptocurrency on their platform. It would hurt their business too much. So then they were forced to take a stand. Now it makes no sense to relist XRP because they might as well wait. So Coinbase got stuck in this really weird position. The point I'm trying to make here is the fact that the chief legal officer at Coinbase is going to sit down with John Deaton really shows that he's standing up for what John Deaton's doing in his fight for XRP holders. And ultimately, I think it's a really good sign that when XRP does get clarity, Coinbase is going to relist it and it's going to do things to once again back the XRP community. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. I really hope John Deaton does ask him, hey, why did you delist XRP and not these other cryptocurrency assets? I have a feeling he's not going to. John Deaton really just wants to focus on bringing people together to fight against the SEC. But either way, this is going to be a really interesting event. And I do give Coinbase a lot of credit for at least sitting down with John Deaton and talking about these things. It really shows that they're not against him. They're not against Ripple. They're not against XRP. They were in a tough position when this case dropped against them. They made some really dumb moves that I think are going to backfire on them in the long run, but ultimately I really don't think it has anything to do with maximalism. So now time for the fun part of this video, where we get to talk about whether or not the Federal Reserve is going to completely destroy our economy. So tomorrow we have an absolutely massive event in which the Federal Reserve is going to decide whether or not they are going to hike interest rates 25 basis points. So prior to today, this decision should have been very easy for the Federal Reserve. They were going to have to hike interest rates by 25 basis points. And the reason why they are hiking interest rates right now is because the Federal Reserve is worried their credibility is on the line. The Federal Reserve totally let inflation seep into our economy, and because of that, people don't really trust they are making the right decisions to really steer our economy in the right direction right now. So the Federal Reserve essentially was responding to that mess up by theirs and saying, okay, we are raising interest rates until inflation goes away. But in the process of raising these rates, they ended up breaking a bunch of banks. Now, for a while, it looked like most of the bank breaking was over, and JP Morgan actually came out yesterday and said, okay, things are looking better. It looks like the banks are fine. But if you watched my video yesterday, I actually showed you guys a very interesting tweet by the CBDC lead at Ripple, Anthony Welfare, where he was saying, no, the banks are not fine, and we are going to see another bank in big trouble very soon. And that specific bank he actually said was PacWest Bancorp. And what do you know? He was actually right by the matter of a couple hours. Earlier today, we saw PacWest go down 27.78%. And we saw a bunch of other regional banks fall with them. So suddenly, this banking crisis that Jamie Dimon was telling us was over and that the Federal Reserve was telling us was over was back. So suddenly, the Federal Reserve is back to breaking the system, and now we are seeing regional banks tanking again. So the Federal Reserve is now stuck in this position. How worried are they about their credibility versus how worried are they about breaking the system? Because if we hike 25 basis points again, these regional banks could go to zero tomorrow. It could be bad. Now, if you guys are wondering how bad it could be, well, let me just show you where we are compared to 2008. And I make this comparison lightly because I really don't think this is going to be like 2008. Right now, the demolition that's happening right now is very controlled. The Fed is causing this, they know they're causing this, and they're really just trying to kill inflation by essentially nuking the economy. So the Fed has full control over stopping this, they just don't want to right now because they want to make sure inflation goes away. We're going to talk about that a little later, but I want to show you this chart because this is wild. What you're looking at right here is the amount of bank failures in 2008. And what you'll see is a ton of small banks failed. But what you're looking at right here is the banks that have failed in the last couple months. You have seen 3 gigantic banks compared to what we saw in 2008. And if you add PacWest to this, you are going to have another pretty big one right up here. And there were a couple other regional banks today that were also down 30%. So you can very easily see how fast this is adding up. The banking system is breaking. The Federal Reserve knows it, but they are convinced they need to break the banking system for their own credibility. But let me show you what's happening with inflation, because this is where things are getting confusing. If you take a look at what has happened to inflation, and everyone is going to comment on this video, you can't trust the government, this is government data, why do you think the government would give you the right data? Guys, calm down. This is not government data. What you are looking at right now is an independent company that tracks inflation. Actually, if you take a look at what's on the screen right here, it says Trueflation, the company I am citing right here, has inflation at 3.86%, and the US government data actually says inflation is at 5%. So this company actually sees less inflation in the economy than the US government. And funny enough, back when inflation was really high a couple months ago, they actually had more inflation in the economy than the government was reporting. So I find their data to be a little more accurate. We can argue about that all day long, but the fact of the matter is just look at the trend. Inflation has been absolutely plummeting. We are on track to actually have deflation early next year if we keep falling at this rate. That means the Federal Reserve has already done their job to get rid of inflation. They are destroying inflation with the fastest rate hikes in US history. The Federal Reserve is for some reason convinced that they need to keep hiking rates until inflation is at 2%. We all know that their rate hikes lag in their effect. The Federal Reserve doesn't do a rate hike tomorrow and inflation comes down 25 basis points. That's just not how it works. It takes a while for the economy to feel the rate hikes and thus for inflation to come down. But if the Federal Reserve does hike rates tomorrow, we could see even more pressure put on these banks, and we could be looking at a situation where who knows how many banks could go under until the next time the Federal Reserve actually has the opportunity to cut rates instead of hiking them. So tomorrow is going to be absolutely critical. We're going to find out how much the Federal Reserve cares about the current system, or whether or not they are going to tear it down to make inflation plummet through zero. Personally, my opinion is inflation has already come down a lot. You can see it's coming down. If this data is right over the government data, we're already very close to 2%, and a lot of the rate hikes aren't even priced in yet, so I think we're going to easily get to 2% over the next couple months. We're going to have to see what happens tomorrow. I am going to be very concerned if the Federal Reserve hikes rates. I think we're going to see panic in the banks. These banks are going to sell off massively. We're going to have to see the government step in. We're going to see more of these banks given to JP Morgan, and it's just going to be a you-know-what show. It's going to be chaos. And ultimately, this is what's going to cause the Fed to pivot. We just don't know when it's going to happen. But tomorrow is going to be absolutely huge for deciding what happens in the future. Now, the important thing to understand is this will likely cause panic in the market, but it's likely going to be a C19-like panic. It's likely going to be a V-bottom. Everyone's going to freak out and be like, oh, the system's falling apart. And then the Federal Reserve is going to come in, pivot, put liquidity in the market, and all the banks that went to zero are going to stay at zero. All the shareholders are going to be screwed, but the companies and assets that are not affected by stuff like this, like cryptocurrencies, are going to go on an exponential run on the Fed's pivot. Let's see how this all plays out. Tomorrow is going to be absolutely huge for the future direction of the market, and we just need to hope that the Federal Reserve understands that inflation is already going down, it is leaving the economy, and if they do another rate hike, they could risk bringing down the entire system. Maybe that's their plan. I have no idea. If they do a rate hike tomorrow, I'm going to be pretty convinced their plan is to tear down the economy. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.